Okay.
There's a few questions from Twitter about kind of humorous questions.
Oh, good.
One from somebody's username, my flat has mould, so presumably a Dunedin resident.
Get Gareth Hughes in there, he'll retrofit you.
What's the worst and best thing the current government has done?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so, yeah, this government's been in power nearly 3 years. What's the best thing they've done? And don't say home insulation.
Oh, no. The best thing they did was possibly what happened yesterday, which was the sleepover case, when the government actually agreed that finally they would put a contribution in to make sure that workers who are dealing with residential care should get the minimum wage instead of $3.77 for their night shift.
Okay.
I mean, it's a remarkable thing for a national government to finally, and it took a long time, and it's the union spent $500,000 getting there, but that's a good thing, and I can't think of any other piece of legislation that I actually felt proud of that the government's done. Okay. That's one I feel proud of. Worst, oh, take your pick.
Well,
you know, like, I've got so many, but I guess I'm also the welfare spokesperson with the Greens, the policy towards beneficiaries. What a pack of scapegoating bastards. What they have done is attack the most vulnerable people to avoid the real economic debate by saying the problem with unemployment and the job market is these lazy poor people. And that, because I work with people and I was a beneficiary advocate before I went to Parliament, the front line is DPB, and people with disabilities are now going to be work tested and sanctioned. But so that's one of the most evil things they've done.
Don't you think, though, that's all a bit of rhetoric from them? That rather than hard policy attack on beneficiaries, isn't it sort of just beneficiary bashing in the sense
Well,
that,
it is, but the problem is it gets played out in the culture of work and income every day. So if you know what I know about what happens in the front line, is that the case managers are humans like the rest of us and who may be doing their best but are formed by the cultural messages all the time about beneficiaries, have just had another direction from government to be hard, to be tough, and to tell people that they're losers if they don't find a job in a tight labour market. So it does have a huge rollout when they use the rhetoric. It's irresponsible, even if it's not hard policy. It is already having an effect on the streets.
Okay, I mean, it was a good question that was asked on Twitter. What about the last Labour government, best and worst?
Oh, God, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I know.
But the best thing they did...
It was 9 years of it.
Yeah. I mean... Yeah, I want to say.
Okay, fair enough.
I think they did some good things, and working for families was a good thing, but they didn't extend it to the beneficiaries. So yes, working for families, that was great, because that means that people, because wages are so low in this country, you have to have something to prop you up, and that was good that they did working for families. It did lift a lot of people.
What about the argument that working for families is really just a subsidy for business? Because we've seen these cleaners in Parliament over the last few days.
I was there.
You know, on $13.50 an hour, which you really just can't survive on.
No.
But they get working for families. So that seems like a good example of the fact that working for families is really a way of the state, you know, giving a subsidy to business so that they can pay low wages, because otherwise, you know...
Well, I think that's a fair argument, but the actual fact is those people get $60 more in the hand than if they didn't get working for families. So until we actually have an economy that's sustainable and works and pays decent wages, we needed to do something about children in poverty. So working for families was a start, but they should have expanded it to beneficiaries. So I can't really say it's a great moment.
Right.
I'm just saying that it was better than not doing it for those families who now get to feed their kids. But I agree with you. I was with the cleaners. This woman has cleaned John Key or the Prime Minister, whoever it is, office for 19 years on the minimum wage. It is disgraceful. The best thing that Labor did, I suppose we didn't send troops to Iraq. That was quite a good thing not to do, you know. But then there was Afghanistan, which was a stupid thing. So, you know, I guess I'm pretty critical of both those governments, and it does seem like what people say they'll do in opposition is often quite different from what they do in government.
There's another question from the Twitter sphere. If you were trapped in a lift with any MP from another party, not the Greens, who would that be and why?
You know, who would I like it to be?
Oh, yeah, who could you tolerate in a lift for like hours on end?
Well, I'd like to have I have been trapped in lift with quite a few honestly, the conversations I've had with John Biscowan about Russell Norman not wearing a tie at the select committee is very interesting. He finds it very disturbing. So you do have these lift conversations. No,
Wow.
oh my
It's
God.
right everywhere.
Yeah,
Even
we're
on, like,
shocked as well.
No. Sometimes he doesn't even wear it.
Crazy.
No, he usually wears a shirt. He usually wears a shirt. Hone and I'd like to be in the lift with Hone because I think there's some good conversations we could have about working constructively together.
Why aren't you in the Mana Party?
Because I'm in the Greens, and I mean,
know,
I have a really strong environmental activist background as well as social justice. So the Greens is my natural home, apart from the fact that the Mana Party didn't exist.
Sure, and that's a pretty good answer. But,
Yeah.
but you know, all things being equal, if both parties were starting today, which one would be it would still be the Greens that you'd be likely to be drawn towards?
I am a Green because I
yeah.
think it's early days for the Mana Party. I mean, we don't know that they're starting trying to build a party just before an election is a really hard call, and they are. If it's a treaty-based party, they're going to have to do a lot of work to develop the treaty model because it's difficult within political parties. Believe me, I work on it in the Greens every day. It's not an easy thing to do. So I think for me, my passion is you cannot achieve social justice without looking after the environment. You cannot look after the environment without social justice. So there's a natural synergy within green policy for me, and I'm committed to the party.
Okay, but other parties can do green stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Supposedly, I wish they'd hurry up.
Okay, but like Mana, I guess. I mean, you've got people like Sue Bradford, your friend,
Yep,
Sue
he's
Bradford.
a good mate of mine. Yeah.
I'm sure they'll have a strong environmental policy. I don't know, at least a strong focus on
Well,
it.
if Angeline Greensill gets
yeah.
into Parliament, they will, because Angeline Greensill, who's Eva Rickard's daughter, her and I have worked together for years on a range of sexy issues like sewage in the sea, and you know, I'm passionate about that, and all kinds of stuff. And Angeline is probably the leading Māori commentator on environmental issues in a national sense. I mean, there's heaps of kaitiaki doing great work around the motu. So I mean, tangata whenua parties will always have some focus, but I must say the Māori Party, I waited, I didn't hear anything, and I was really keen to work with them on environmental issues, but I think they got captured. That's the risk.
Sorry, the Mana Party? Or
No, the Māori Party.
The Māori Party,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so what's your analysis of the Māori Party? What's happened with them?
Well, it's the classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you sup with the devil, and it's like there's that. I totally understand why a group of politicians who've been working all their lives for Māori well-being saw an opportunity and thought they could grab it. But what happens is when you're a small party, they eat you alive.
Right.
And they also make you decide what your politics are. And I think the problem with the Māori Party was their politics was related to they went down the economic path, the conventional economic path, and so they lost touch with a lot of their grassroots, flaxroots members who were passionate. I was on the hikoi, so I know a lot of those people who helped form the Māori Party.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this brings up the question of the Green Party's future, and with the sort of groundbreaking new decision of the Green Parties to consider a coalition with National or supporting a National Party in government.
Well, I think highly unlikely with a preference for Labour is actually, you can spin it how you like, but I don't know what highly unlikely means to you, but for me it means pigs probably cannot fly.
So isn't that extremely unlikely then?
No, it's highly unlikely. I mean, with genetic engineering, a pig might fly, but it's highly unlikely.
So, how unhappy would you be if that highly unlikely situation evolved?
Oh, well, it would be very difficult for me.
Yeah. So I sort of gather that you're probably the most left within the Green Caucus and probably the most anti-national. Would that be right?
Well, I don't know, because we don't sit around going, you know, who hates National today?
But
I'm not going to go, I'm more left than you to Kevin Haig or somebody, you know.
There are people that have more synergies, I think, within the Greens with National.
I don't know who really. I mean, I think it's it's an evolving thing, and I think the younger generation of activists express themselves, and Greens express themselves differently. I'm 57 years old. I come out of very much a Green left background, so I'm absolutely clear that I'm not comfortable with the national government. I'm not comfortable with the National Party particularly, but I'm not mad on any of the major parties at this point in time.
So, a question. Is this about the Greens and the...
Oh, it was just about what you were talking about before.
Go.
Is it the Green Party's policy that New Zealand's divided into two nations, the Maori nation and another nation?
Interesting question, yeah. You've said lots of interesting things around this area, so, yeah.
I don't think that's the issue. I think we've always had two nations. One is called, colonisation automatically creates that hierarchy. And to be a Pākehā in New Zealand is to experience privilege that we're not even aware of. And to be a Māori is to experience discrimination that unless you are Māori, you're not aware of. We've always had those, and that's both structural and institutional and personal. You asked Matiria Ture, because her and I had a conversation about a little thing. She gets followed in shops. by people, not because they're her fans, but because they're the shop guy, the police person, the security guard, to make sure she's not a thief. Never happened to me once, even when I was a hippie wearing slightly less than fashionable clothing. So, and looking slightly disreputable. Because we live in a racist society, it's not about having two tiers. The treaty offers us an opportunity to create a harmonious nation and to recognise tangata whenua in terms of their own sovereignty. The treaty is a great thing for us. It's the way we make peace. But if we keep imagining that we are one people, Don Brash, rhetoric style, all we're going to do is create even greater discrimination. And I've devoted a lot of my life to this. I really do.
So,
I want peace for my grandchild.
So in strict policy terms, in regard to that sort of issue, what would you like to see changed that could make that sort of on the ground?
Well, it's a constitutional issue, isn't it? And I think we've all been there's a question, but they've all been a bit disappointed in the constitutional debate not really taking on that issue and out to the community, because really we can't have treaty-based constitutional change without the communities being able to engage with it and feel comfortable with it, so that your questions and the issues you're raising get debated. Not so I browbeat you about the right way to look at the treaty, but that we actually have that conversation at a national level and then build a country which is based on our greatest hope, which is a justice-based, treaty-based society that recognises that tangata whenua are here and so are we.
I guess for some people that would be just sounding a bit airy-fairy, and what's the hard policy change?
I ain't airy-fairy getting people to talk about the treaty, believe me.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about it, and some people would say we've talked too much and there hasn't actually been real change, and that Maori are still at the bottom of the heap, and that biculturalism or whatever doesn't necessarily give you food on the table. So, what policy changes in relationship to what you're talking about would actually advance the economic interests?
Well, you have to start with the Constitution, but then when it comes to everything from policy around justice, like restorative justice and marae justice, because we, in a really hard policy terms, we are building motorways to shove more Māoris along those motorways into prison. That's what we're doing in this country. And the government's only justice policy is to build more prisons to lock up more Māoris. And so that's about structural discrimination and not having a Māori-based aspect to our justice system. So that's justice. Health. There's a heap of evidence that doctors discriminate against Māori patients and don't give them full information. I mean, there are so many institutions that actually need change, and there should be leadership from Parliament on this issue.
I mean, perhaps it's too difficult question that I'm trying to get